What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I'm Colin Childs, and today we're going to be checking out a few of the solid-state logic emulators made by Waves. So we're going to be using a guitar track today. This is what we got going on. Alright, so to start off, I'm going to take one of those tracks, put it in mono. We're going to go ahead and take a look at the regular SSL channel here. You can start out with a preset, or you can start from the default. I think today we're going to start from the default, and I'll go through everything. I'll show you how it works in detail, and what kind of sound you're going to want to try to get out of it, if you're going to use it on guitar or not. Normally, for these SSL channels, you want to use these on a bus or a master bus. But today, just for example purposes, I'm going to be showing it to you on the guitar tracks, the individual tracks. Later on, I'm going to create a bus, and I'm going to show you how to use it in that way. So starting out, we have our filter section. We've got a pretty big EQ section here. We've got dynamics, which is your compressor, and then you have an expander and a gate option right here, and then you have a little master section here. You have a phase inverter, you have your in and out gain, and then you have a master fader. So let's take a look at the filter section. We're dealing with guitar today. So what I like to do is I like to roll off my low end anywhere from 100 to 120, because we don't really need all that. And when you're mixing, you want to make space for your bass and your kick drum in that low end area. So for guitars, that's a good section where I like to take off. And for the high end, I'll usually end up somewhere around 8K. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now and show you what that sounds like. That's how simple it is, and I think that's a pretty good starting point for us. We'll go ahead and move on down to the EQ section. After that, we'll do dynamics, and then we will come back and I'll explain exactly what this split button here does. So moving on into the EQ section, I might change a little bit of the high frequencies here. When we get down to the high mid, I'm going to change where my frequency range is, and I'll probably move this to about 2K, and might do a little boost there. And then depending on how that sounds, I may change or may not change the low, mids, and low. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I was kind of messing around with the frequency range there. For heavy metal guitars, I really like to go closer to 1.5 or 2K. And if you're playing something like a lighter kind of rock, you probably want to go up to 3 or 4, but I'm going to leave it right down here around 2. Gives kind of a really cool mid-range vibe to it, and that's really prominent in a lot of heavy metal tones. So that's where I like to keep it. We're not going too crazy. If you go too crazy, it's going to sound out of whack. We're just adding a little bit of sparkle to it, a little bit of life, and having it pop out a little bit better. So let's go down. I'll go down through the lower frequencies here and see if we can get a cool tone. just gonna leave those there for now. I don't think we really need any more low end in this guitar. Coming up to the dynamics section, this is our compressor. So I'm gonna go around 5 or 6 to 1 for the ratio. And then I'll tweak the threshold. For the release, we can go a little bit quicker time on this. So let's go ahead and see how that sounds. All right, I think that's pretty good. If you could tell, I didn't have any of my peaks go past 10. I was just crushing it a little bit too hard. And then I click this button here, which actually creates a faster attack, which is what I was going for. I wanted a faster attack, faster release. So it gets kind of that pumpy feeling and motion in the mix. And then, yeah, all you really got to do is be careful setting your threshold. You don't want to take too much dB reduction off of it because it will crush your mix. All you got to do is watch right here on this meter, and it'll tell you exactly how much you're taking off if you don't trust your ears. So moving down, we're going to get to the gate and the expander. I'll probably end up putting it on the expanding option because there is a lot of audio going on, and from what I've experienced, the SSL channel has trouble detecting where those spots are. So I'll show you what I mean in a second. I'll leave the gate on. It's probably not going to do much. When I take it off and add expansion, you'll see it kind of working a little bit better. Alright, once again, I set up a fast release and fast attack. If you can see, I almost had to put the threshold and the range all the way down just to get to work. I am going to leave the gate off for now. I think the expander is doing a good enough job. And when I had the gate on, it was kind of cutting out some spots that were coming in real fast. That's another reason why I had the attack and release set up very quick so that the gate would work super quick and then it would release and come right off. So moving on, if you did have phase issues between two instruments and you had this on one of the tracks, you click your phase button and boom, it's right in phase. So we do have an analog selection down here. All that does is it's going to model a true SSL console. You're going to get some little bit of noise and saturation to the mix, so might be hard to hear, but I'm going to click it on for you. That's pretty much all it does. Without having multiple tracks with that setting on, it is kind of hard to hear if you're not used to it. All I'm going to do now is maybe tweak some of my EQ settings, and then we'll move up here to the filter, and I will show you exactly what that split button does. Alright, I think I'm getting a pretty good tone out of that. Moving along up here, what this split button actually does is it'll take the filter and kind of put it ahead in the signal chain before the dynamics section. So without it, your dynamics are compressing everything before it goes into the filter and the EQ. If you hit this split button, it's going to split it from that, and your dynamics are now going to be compressing a different frequency range, being 120 up to 8K, if that's what you chose to filter. So I'll click it on and off. Once again, it's going to be hard to hear, but you can hear a little bit of a difference. And you can tell by doing that, our entire dynamics section is acting totally different. So you do want to be sure to go in and adjust that. Right now, I think it's hitting a little bit hard, so I'm going to adjust my release and maybe my ratio, and we're going to see if we can get a good setting on that. Alright, so all I ended up doing was lowering my ratio a little bit, adjusting the threshold, and then I ended up putting the release all the way to the fastest setting because I did feel that it was holding it a little bit too long with my reduction. So I'm going to go ahead and place the SSL E channel on the second track. Just to note, I am using a DI track, ran through PreSonus Studio One Amplifier. That's how we are getting our amplifier tone. So I now have the SSL E channel on both tracks set stereo. So we're going to take a listen at how that sounds. And this is how it sounds without those plugins on. So quite a bit of difference there, what we did. How I like to do it is I like to just use the EQ and then I'll put the compression on a bus. Moving along, we're going to do the same exact thing with the G channel. I'm going to put the same exact settings on and we're going to see how that works. Okay, so I have relatively the same exact settings on the G channel as the E channel. And the major difference between the E channel and the G channel is that the G channel consoles are used in a lot of heavy rock music. They just have a certain characteristic and saturation to them that engineers would prefer to use over the E channel consoles. And I am noticing a bit different kind of saturation and characteristic to it, but it's relatively the same. And I can move the knobs in a way that it kind of reacts the same as the other plugin. So right now we'll go ahead and we'll just listen to the mono track and we'll kind of compare the two. So yeah, I definitely think the G channel has a certain characteristic to it. It brings out other frequencies in the track. Definitely sounds more excited, a little bit more pumpy. Both of them are really great plugins to use, but like I said, I would use them on a bus rather than an individual track like a guitar track. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this over to the second track and play it in stereo for you. Alright, and the last one before we get to the SSL compressor is going to be the SSL EQ by itself. So here we have the SSL EQ, very simplified. We have an analog selection. We've got our filter, which I've set to around 100 to 120. And then we've got our low frequency, low, mid, and high. You have an EQ in and out button if you want to turn it off. And then you have your phase and your input. Very simple. You've got a meter here. You do have some boost options, which is cool. And I'm going to run through these and set a good tone. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that for now. The only downside to the SSL EQ by itself is that you don't have a high frequency filter or a low pass. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this one over just like we did before, and I'll show you them in a stereo pair. Okay guys, so the next step we're going to do is just add the compressor to our bus. I'll show you what settings I've selected for this. I'm just going to go with a 2-to-1 ratio. Pretty quick release. I might adjust that if I feel that I want a little bit different vibe from it. And then a little bit on the slower side with the attack, and I'll get to why that is in a minute. So I'm going to go through and see if anything needs adjusted. Alright, cool. I like where that's sitting. That's a nice glue setting, especially for heavy guitars. Depending on the genre or how heavy or how hard the instrument's being played, that's going to depend on where my ratio is at. But for the majority of the time on these buses, I will do just 2-to-1. For the release, I'm always going with a quick release, especially for something that's being played faster. I don't want the next transient that comes in to be cut off or smashed down by the compressor. So I'm going with a super quick release, and then just to keep things smooth so things aren't getting compressed too noticeable or too quick and getting smashed down from the rest of the mix. I'm going with a little bit slower attack, and that kind of gives that smoothness in there. All Makeup's going to do is adjust your gain level after the fact, so I'm just leaving that at 0 right now. And then your threshold, I have my threshold all the way up. If I was still getting dB reduction and I have my threshold all the way up, all I would do is go into the individual tracks and turn those down. And then you would notice that the compression is actually reducing a lot less, if not anything, at that point. And then you can go ahead and adjust your threshold. So that's basically it. I'm going to play this back for you one more time without the plugins on, and then I'm going to play it back for you with the plugins on. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you learned 1 or 2 things about these plugins. If you liked the video, leave a thumbs up. If you want to see more, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next vid.